President Obama talked about foreign policy as well as domestic issues in his State of the Union address. Here's what he said about Afghanistan.
Our purpose is clear. By preventing the Taliban from reestablishing a stranglehold over the Afghan people, we will deny al-Qaeda the safe haven that served as the launching pad for 9/11.
American troops were sent into Afghanistan a decade ago to find Osama bin Laden after the 9/11 attacks. The al-Qaeda leader, as you know, remains at large. CNN national security analyst Peter Bergen has written a new book. It's called The Longest War, The Enduring Conflict Between America and al-Qaeda. And he sat down to talk to Anderson recently.
How's the war going? I mean, you've made so many trips there.
Oh, God, it's such a complicated question. You know, on the plus side, you know, millions of girls in schools, 1 in 4 Afghans has a cell phone, and maybe an arguable form of progress, but in a country that didn't have a phone system. Traffic, you know, Kabul is pretty safe now, the capital. Traffic is intense, you know, businesses are opening. Then, you know, the Taliban have, you know, if you look at the numbers on Taliban attacks, I mean, despite the fact there's a lot of pressure against them, they're doing well in places like the north and the west, which they hadn't really done well before. So.
Are we still essentially nation building? I mean, that McChrystal's strategy was, you know, holding and kind of rebuilding. I mean, they didn't call it nation building, right, but that's what it was.
I think at the end of the day, look, you're trying to build an Afghan national army. That's a pretty big part of a nation. That's our exit strategy. I mean, we can call it whatever we want, but we're doing something substantial. We're not just doing a sort of relatively small peacekeeping operation. We're doing something much bigger. And I think that's the right thing to do.
In the book, you write that 9/11 backfired on Osama bin Laden.
Yeah.
How so?
Well, you know, what did he want us? What did he hope to achieve? He hoped to get the United States out of the Middle East so that the Saudi regime would fall and the Taliban would replace it, or a Taliban-style regime. None of that happened. You know, the United States didn't pull out of the Middle East as a result of 9/11. We're in Afghanistan. We're in Iraq. Our relations with the Saudis and the Egyptians are stronger than ever. His strategic goals have not succeeded, and he lost his base in Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda means the base in Arabic. They lost that base. They had this great, they almost ran a parallel state in Afghanistan.
But he has gone from a minor player kind of known in the region to a worldwide...
Sure, he's become a world historical figure as a result of what he did and what he planned. But, you know, his strategic goals are no closer. In fact, they're much further away. If the intention was regime change in the Middle East to create Taliban-style theocracies, which it is, you know, that goal is very, very long way away from succeeding.
When you look, I mean, do you think Yemen has taken over from Afghanistan in terms of its importance as a base for global jihad for attacks in the United States?
They're not either or. I mean, Al-Qaeda continues to train Westerners in the tribal regions of Pakistan. That's one of the reasons we had in the fall of last year, a Europe-wide alert because of a number of Europeans who were getting training from the groups there. And then, of course, you have Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. A very talented bomb maker keeps making bombs intending to bring down American jets. We saw with his cargo plane plot in the fall that this guy's out there making bombs. So, you know, I think both are problematic.
You credit with the U.S. with actually helping strengthen Al-Qaeda's cause.
Well, certainly the invasion of Iraq, you know, coercive interrogations, Guantanamo, Abu Ghraib, all these things, you know, kind of help feed into bin Laden's master narrative that we're at war with Islam, even though that isn't the case. The Iraq war in particular was, you know, quite counterproductive. And it gave bin Laden's organization is losing the war of ideas in the Muslim world. But Iraq kind of...
Do you think they are losing the war of ideas?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Support for bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, suicide bombing is dropping precipitously. But, you know, at the end of the day, this has always been a small group of people, and, you know, we've seen in history that small groups of people can continue to influence history, and Al-Qaeda values one recruit more than, you know, 1,000 followers or supporters. And so, you know, it's not like they're going to go out of business just because they're losing popular support, but they are, and over time that makes them increasingly irrelevant. I think, you know, if we have this conversation 5, 10 years from now, I think that their appeal is fading.
Was there something you started out, an idea in your mind that you started out writing the book with The Longest War, that you changed? I mean, in writing the book, did you change your mind about anything? Did it?
Well, you know, I mean, it took a while to write the book. I mean, one of the kind of unexpected things is how people that once were bin Laden's religious mentors and also people who fought with him in Afghanistan have turned against him very publicly in the last several years. Very unpredictable thing. And Al-Qaeda has a very hard time responding to that because these are major religious figures. These are, you know, jihadi heroes, and they've publicly turned against bin Laden. And I think that's all part of this larger story of them losing the war of ideas in the Muslim world, which I don't think is well understood, perhaps, here in the West.
Have you been surprised by the growth of extremists within the United States?
That wasn't predictable. I mean, if we'd had this conversation 2 years ago, Anderson, I would have said, the American Muslim community has overwhelmingly rejected this ideological virus, which is still true. But, 2009 saw more jihadi terrorism cases in the United States than any year before. And, some of them were somewhat threatening, whether it was Major Nidal Hassan, whether it was Najibullah Azazi, who was planning to blow up bombs in the subway in Manhattan. So, it's not an existential problem by any stretch. It's not even necessarily a particularly big deal, but it is a real phenomenon. It was not something I would have predicted. I always thought that the American Muslim community was pretty insulated from these ideas because they brought into the American dream, they benefited from the American dream.
Right, an incredibly well-assimilated population as compared to Muslims in Europe.
Yeah, well-assimilated, higher incomes than most Americans, better educated. But, we've seen Hispanic American converts to Islam, African American converts to Islam, joining Al-Qaeda. We've seen Somali Americans go to Somalia. None of this is predictable. And, 30 years ago, these guys might have joined some other, some like the Weather Underground or the Black Panthers. But, today, jihadism is the kind of, if you want to act out against the United States, do something where you think that your life is given meaning. This is the ideology that exists.
Mm. The book is The Longest War. It's a fascinating account of the conflict against Al-Qaeda. Peter, thanks.
No, thank you, Anderson.
Up next, we got this story.